Hello, beautiful people. Excited for another episode of Alter Your Health, where we are on a roll here, kind of debunking a lot of the mythology in nutritional, quote unquote, science when it comes to a lot of anti nutrients. And we are continuing the conversation today talking about phytoestrogens. I don't think phytoestrogens are technically classified as quote unquote anti nutrients. However, they are feared molecules in plant foods that I want to dive into. And I've had the opportunity to really dissect a lot of the scientific studies and sift through a lot of research. And I have to say, it wasn't that difficult because the mountains of evidence to support the fact that phytoestrogens are, in fact, healthy for both men and women of all ages is pretty predominant. There's not a lot of negative science, if you will, as it pertains to the risks associated with eating quote unquote phytoestrogens. However, I am going to be talking about, I'm going to save this for the end, kind of the risks and things to consider when eating some of these compounds, specifically soy products. So we've got a lot to cover today. And as we've been doing, we're going to start with a little bit of humor, a little bit of laughing, hopefully. I also just want to come out and say right off the bat that I actually do not consume soy products hardly ever. I think a lot of people think that a plant based diet is just equal to a soy-based diet. It's like if someone is not eating animal products, then they must be eating soy. Of course, we're talking about much more than soy in today's episode when we're talking about phytoestrogens. Soy being kind of the one most prominent plant food that contains phytoestrogen compounds. However, it's very easy and healthy, and a lot of people do, like myself, eat a plant-based diet without eating soy. You don't have to eat soy, but that being said, eating soy, as we'll come to see through the science, is very healthy. And today we are focusing on just kind of the phytoestrogen compounds. The whole idea of soy as a great source of protein and essential amino acids and kind of a good food in terms of its nutritional value, that's another conversation. We're not going to dive that deeply into it. But like I said, at the end, we are going to cover some important details when choosing soy products wisely. So let's just turn into our memes to start it off with. And of course, we're talking about a lot more than soy, but this one's, I don't know, if you know kind of thing. There's little cartoon people who eat meat consume way more soy indirectly than vegans, when you actually know how supply chains work. This is, of course, pointing out the fact that the conventional farming and agricultural industry, animal agriculture, most animals are fed a soy-based diet and grains and a lot of GMO processed foods. So a lot of people look at all the soy fields or corn fields and they're like, oh my gosh, the vegans are eating all the soy and the corn and blah, blah, blah. All that soy, all that corn, like not all of it, but 90% or something crazy is actually going to feed the animals. So the animals are kind of the middlemen for the nutrition. So yeah, if you know, you know. This is kind of funny. Okay. I thought it was funny. What if soy milk is just regular milk introducing itself in Spanish? Ha 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 ha. Soy milk. Soy, of course, yo soy milk. Okay. My Spanish isn't that great, but I know what soy milk means. Here's another one. And this is, of course, playing on this idea that, people who eat soy or men who eat soy are less masculine or something like that. Maybe I'm so masculine because I don't eat soy. Maybe that's just I'm just kidding. Here's is this the Doge dog? Men in the 1770s. I will go to war with the most powerful army in the world for my freedom and for the freedom of my fellow man. Men in 2020, I like soy. I don't know. It's funny. It's cute. It's, of course, completely bogus when we think about and understand, that soy is not feminizing, and we'll get into the science of that towards the end of today's conversation. Here's some fear mongering: 5 reasons to not eat soy. Soy creates digestive issues. I don't know about that. Show me the evidence. Soy is most likely from a GMO source. We're going to be talking about that at the end, just very briefly. Soy is linked to ADD, attention deficit disorder. Again, I don't know any. I haven't found any of that. Soy disrupts the thyroid. We talked last week about goitrogens and genestein, one of the compounds in soy, one of the quote unquote phytoestrogens in soy, has been called a goitrogen. Not a lot of evidence to suggest that it has goitrogenic activity, blocking the uptake of iodine by the thyroid gland when we have enough iodine. Soy is potential feminizing agent. That's the scary one, right, for us men. Simply not true. Simply not. No science there. We'll get into the science. We're just going through the memes first. Here's kind of an interesting one. No, the Globo Homo NWO elites are going to make me eat soy and destroy my masculinity. WTF? I've been eating tofu for the last 2,000 years and I've turned out fine. There's this like samurai guy. Soy has been a part of Asian cultures for thousands of years. Yeah, they're turning out just fine. Of course, the westernization of Asian diets, that's really the issue. Increased processed foods, maybe increased animal products as well. That's kind of an issue for the health of Asian populations. But there is this idea that like the global elites want us to all be vegan, and being vegan means eating soy. Again, being vegan, being plant-based does not equate to being soy-based. This is maybe one of my favorite ones. Tofu is gross. Let me tell you where eggs come from. Yeah. Or sausage or bacon or animal flesh or milk or anything else for that matter. So of course, we're talking about a lot more than soy, but most of these memes are soy memes. And here's one that I came up with that just kind of leads us into the actual conversation for today, which is talking about the actual compounds that are actually quote unquote phytoestrogens. And I use the term quote unquote phytoestrogens because the fact is that phytoestrogen means plant estrogen, but these quote unquote phytoestrogens are not plant estrogens. They're not estrogens. It's really a misnomer. They're compounds that have a way of modulating estrogen receptors. And when we modulate estrogen receptors, oftentimes we block or change the downstream effect from that receptor. We don't just put estrogen in the system. That's not like how it goes. But these are the compounds that we're talking about. They're big words. I'm not even going to try to say a lot of these words, especially the lignans. But isoflavones and lignans, those are the most commonly consumed, quote unquote, phytoestrogens, or the phytoestrogens that are consumed in the highest amounts. There's also coumestans and stilbenes. Resveratrol is a quote unquote phytoestrogen. But isoflavones like genestein and daidzein, and then the lignans, like I said, I'm not going to pronounce these names. I'm not going to try to pronounce these names, but lignans are found in flax seeds. The isoflavones found in soybeans, of course. Coumestans found in a lot of foods like Brussels sprouts, spinach, soybeans, and other legumes as well. Stilbenes like resveratrol, mostly found in grapes. So these are the, again, quote unquote, phytoestrogens that we're talking about. We're really, really talking about the top two, the isoflavones and the lignans. And just to give you an idea, I've got some numbers relating to the quantity of these compounds that are found in our whole plant foods. So soybeans, like whole intact soybeans, contain about 103.6 milligrams per 100 grams isoflavones. Tofu, once we start processing the soybean a little bit to create tofu contains 27.2 milligrams per 100 grams of tofu. Tempeh, a little bit more slightly processed and fermented, 18.3 milligrams per 100 grams tempeh. And then soy milk, a lot of people think, oh man, I'm just drinking a lot of soy milk. I must be consuming lots of these quote unquote phytoestrogens. just 2.9 milligrams per 100 grams of soy milk. So whole soybeans contain, like 40 times more isoflavones than soy milk. Now let's talk about the numbers in lignans for a second. Far and away, the whole food with the most, or whole plant food with the most lignans, as you see here, is flaxseed. Flaxseed contains 380 milligrams of lignans per 100 grams of flaxseed. And then sesame seeds is second runner up, 8 milligrams lignans per 100 grams flaxseed. So these are the compounds that we're talking about. Again, generally we're talking about soy and flax seeds as being the far and away highest source of these phytoestrogen compounds, just to be clear. So let's move on into the science. And a lot of the science is looking at the benefits of these compounds having to do with menopausal symptoms. So we're starting by talking about menopause, which of course doesn't relate to all of us, but the fact is that these compounds are hugely beneficial in modulating our estrogen receptors, not our, but your, if you are going through menopause. I'm not going to go through menopause anytime soon. But here's an interesting study looking at the psychological assessment of the effects of treatment with phytoestrogens on postmenopausal women, a randomized double-blind crossover placebo-controlled study. So these results suggest that isoflavones may have positive effects on postmenopausal women, improving cognitive performance and mood. Just simply mood enhancing effects of these compounds. So pretty interesting, because a lot of the mood swings, and I don't want to use the term mood disorders because I don't really believe in mood disorders, but a lot of these effects have been attributed to the changing in hormones. So what these estrogen receptor modulator compounds do is they come in and just stabilize things. They just ground things a little bit better in our physiology. Not our physiology, but your physiology as you go through menopause. Here's another study looking at the efficacy of phytoestrogens for menopausal symptoms. Here's a meta-analysis and systematic review. The conclusion of this one is that phytoestrogens appear to reduce the frequency of hot flashes in menopausal women without serious side effects. So that's, of course, another big symptom of menopause, hot flashes. So phytoestrogens seem to have a positive beneficial role in decreasing those sort of symptoms. Again, by grounding things, by modulating the estrogen receptors, ultimately in a beneficial, productive, healthy sort of way. Yet another one looking at the effects of phytoestrogens on bone mineral density during the menopause transition, a systematic review of randomized controlled trials. Again, with menopause, the change in estrogen levels in the body increases the risk of osteoporosis, osteopenia, decreased bone mineral density. So supplementing with estrogen and hormone replacement therapy, kind of a controversial thing. The studies from these phytoestrogen studies indicate that just eating more phytoestrogens can be as helpful as hormone replacement therapy. So the conclusion here says that supplementation with a phytoestrogen can probably prevent a reduction of bone mineral density and maintain healthy bone structure during menopause. Pretty good. We'll take maintaining bone mineral density during menopause. And again, this it's most important during periods of menopause when these estrogen levels are changing. We want to stabilize things, but even before menopause, after menopause, even for men, these kind of things, as we'll get into in a little bit, can be very helpful. Another one looking at hot flashes in menopause. This one I'm gonna take a brief transition or a brief pause from the study and just explain to you a very interesting phenomenon having to do with how these phytoestrogen compounds, these ones that we're talking about, how these isoflavones and lignans and coumestans and stilbenes get activated into their more bioavailable state. And this is really interesting stuff, because if this is kind of, to me, common sense, what happens when we eat whole plant foods? Our microbiome transforms all of these compounds in our gut, and we transform a lot of these phytoestrogen compounds to the more active phytochemical which is actually called equal. There's a few of them, but equal is the more active actual compound that is modulating the estrogen receptor. It's actually not the lignans. It's actually not the isoflavones. It's what those compounds are broken down and transformed to by our gut microbes. And there have been studies, a lot of the studies, I'm sharing with you some of the real positive, strong studies, but there are some studies that are equivocal. Like they're not really strong. It's not like there's that any risks associated with eating more phytoestrogens, but some people eat phytoestrogens and they're like, oh, I still have hot flashes. Oh, I still have all these, symptoms of menopause or symptoms of estrogen dominance or whatever it is. So why is that? Well, because everyone's microbiome is different, and specifically people who are from a culture where there is a lot of soy and a lot of phytoestrogen compounds consumed, they have more gut bacteria that are better and more efficient at converting the phytoestrogen compounds into the compounds such as equal. So we can actually create and shift and modulate our gut microbiome to adapt in a way that breaks down and transforms these compounds into the more bioactive and effective compounds, by eating more of the plant-rich foods, by eating more of the whole soy products, by eating more of the flax seeds and these sort of things. So the cool thing is that I didn't even know this until I started digging into the research. Let's see if I can find the one equal. So we can kind of skip the phytoestrogen and just go right to the more bioactive compound, which is equal. So equal supplementation decreases hot flashes in postmenopausal women. So as I said, soy isoflavones may benefit some, but not all menopausal women, and the ability of the women to produce equal may be the major determinant of effectiveness based on the microbiome, right? From equal supplementation, in conclusion, this study found that supplementing equal to non-equal or equal non-producers significantly lowered the incidence and or severity of hot flashes in menopausal women. So that's pretty cool. If you have been eating phytoestrogens, but not really experiencing those kind of estrogenic benefits that you would have hoped if you're a woman, then you can take this compound. I don't know about men taking it, but again, it's just an estrogen modulator. So yeah, kind of interesting stuff. Really helping us understand really what's going on in the body. Now we're shifting away from menopause talk to talk that applies to all of us, which is heart disease risk. The intake of isoflavone is and risk for cardiovascular events, implications for vascular endothelial function, and the carotid atherosclerotic burden. So the cool thing is that not only are these phytoestrogen compounds, quote unquote phytoestrogen compounds, health promoting in terms of balancing and modulating estrogen receptors, again, for both men and women. We'll talk about men in just a little bit. But these compounds also have other benefits downstream to that. So the conclusion from this study shares that in persons at high risk of cardiovascular event, a greater isoflavone intake is associated with better vascular endothelial function and lower carotid atherosclerotic burden. There's a strong correlation or a strong connection between hormones and vascular health. And of course, postmenopausal, women are at increased risk of cardiovascular disease for a number of reasons. So not only do the estrogen, the phytoestrogens like isoflavones kind of help to modulate estrogen levels and decrease menopausal symptoms, but they also decrease risk of various diseases after menopause as well as before menopause, due to those estrogenic effects. And I guess I should probably kind of misspoke. It's not purely estrogenic effects. These compounds have, in addition to being, quote unquote, estrogen modulators, they're simply antioxidants, and they're, healthy for our endothelial function, amongst so many other things. So pretty cool how we can eat more of these isoflavones and have increased endothelial function, which is, of course, a measurement of our vascular health. Healthy blood flow, healthy perfusion of our muscles, our heart, our brain, our kidneys, our liver, and so on and so forth. So here is another study looking at endothelial function, exposure to isoflavone containing soy products and endothelial function, meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials. So exposure to isoflavones can modestly but significantly improve endothelial function as measured by FMD, which is, why is that acronym escaping me? It is up here. Flow. It's something about flow, right? Flow FMD. Sorry about that, guys. But yeah, therefore, exposure to isoflavone supplements may beneficially influence vascular health for sure. So, kind of just redundant of what the study, I did my best to kind of, there's tons of research. So, I guess those two studies were a little bit redundant. Sorry about that. Looking at the next one, oh, what did I do? Does phytoestrogen supplementation improve cognition in humans? So cognition is important, of course, very important. And vascular health and cognition are very tightly connected. So if something improves vascular health and endothelial function, I would guess that it would also improve cognition. But we'll see what the science, the studies says. So six, I don't know why I highlighted these two sentences up here. 6 soy isoflavone studies showed positive cognitive effects. Small to medium size cognitive benefits of resveratrol. Oh yeah, resveratrol is another one of those phytoestrogen compounds that is also very strong antioxidant. So resveratrol supplementation, we talked about resveratrol as also being one of those scary goitrogen compounds. So be careful. If you're afraid of goitrogens, don't take resveratrol. But of course, in order to combat any goitrogenic effects, we just need to have iodine status sufficient. So the main takeaway is that supplementation with either soy isoflavone or resveratrol improved executive function and memory domains of cognitively normal older adults in half of the included studies, mostly with medium-sized effect sizes. With medium effect sizes. So not super strong science, not super strong evidence from the systemic review, but pretty good. Pretty good. Some of this might be attributed to the fact that some people are more responsive than others due to the microbiome and everything else that's going on in our crazy bodies. So another one, oh, this is interesting. The NHANES, looking at the urine, the NHANES, the association between urinary phytoestrogen excretion and components of the metabolic syndrome in the NHANES data. So metabolic syndrome, huge, vast field of study. Of course, when people are talking about metabolic syndrome, it's insulin resistance and diabetes and obesity, and I guess cardiovascular disease also falls into metabolic syndrome oftentimes. But this is pretty interesting because they're simply looking at the excretion of these compounds, like the byproducts or metabolites from eating phytoestrogens, and the correlation with metabolic syndrome. So our study shows that an increasing excretion of lignans, especially enterolactone, which is one of those lignans found in flax seeds, might be associated with a decreased presence of the metabolic syndrome. So the more we're putting in our body and the more we're flushing out of our body, the less metabolic syndrome we have. So phytoestrogen going through the body, less metabolic syndrome. I don't know about you, but I'll take that. So that's pretty good, pretty cool. Again, kind of a correlation kind of thing. We got to take all this and use our brains and connect the dots. So a lot of correlative studies, a lot of mechanistic studies, and it all comes together to paint a clearer picture. So here's another one looking at soy phytoestrogens and metabolism, a review. So overall, there is a suggestive body of evidence that soy and dietary phytoestrogens favorably alter glycemic control, improve weight and fat loss, and lower triglycerides, lower LDL, and lower cholesterol and total cholesterol. Sorry, I can't read. I can talk, but I can't read for some reason. But so anyways, all of these metrics associated with increased phytoestrogen intake are healthy. We want We want glycemic control. We want improved weight. We want fat loss. We want lower triglycerides. We want lower LDL levels. We want lower total cholesterol levels. So these are all good things. So again, evidence is pretty good. And we're not talking about just, we already talked about the menopausal stuff. We already talked about the hormonal women, lady stuff. This is about just like general population. Um, okay, we're getting there to the good stuff. Getting to the good stuff, you guys. Oh, here's another one first. I guess it's good. It's all good stuff. But this one's looking at genestein, which is one of those specific isoflavones, and diabetes specifically. So preclinical studies demonstrated that genestein decreases body weight and circulating glucose and triglyceride concentrations, whereas increasing insulin levels and insulin sensitivity. So more insulin sensitivity, more tightly regulated glucose levels, less diabetes when we eat genestein or genestein containing foods such as soy. Again, pretty good stuff. I'll take some of that, please. Even though I don't eat a lot of soy, back to my previous introduction here, you don't have to eat soy, but there's no risk in eating soy. There's a lot of benefits from eating soy. So here's a little Framingham study. Dietary intake of phytoestrogens is associated with a favorable metabolic cardiovascular risk profile in postmenopausal women. So back to just the menopausal women. So the conclusion from here is that high intake of phytoestrogens in postmenopausal women appears to be associated with favorable metabolic cardiovascular risk. We already know this. We already went through some previous studies that showed us the same thing. But thank you, Framingham study, for for telling us what we already know. So soy isoflavones and breast cancer. Okay, cool. We're getting to the good stuff. We're getting to cancer because this is where things get controversial for reasons, honestly, I don't know. I think people have it in their minds like, okay, a lot of female reproductive cancers are estrogen sensitive. So I need to be mindful of my consumption of estrogen. But when we understand, again, how these estrogen modulating compounds work in our body, we can understand how they can have benefits on these quote unquote estrogen sensitive cancers. So, of course, breast cancer, one of the most common types of cancer. Here is a meta-analysis of soy isoflavones and breast cancer. The conclusion is that the consumption of soy isoflavones can reduce the risk of breast cancer in premenopausal and postmenopausal women, period. Can't get any more clear than that. So yes, eating soy isoflavones is healthy and reduces risk of breast cancer, which is always good, always good. So doesn't increase risk, reduce risks. Okay, just so that's clear, right? But here's another cancer, endometrial cancer, again, a reproductive cancer, one that tends to be quote unquote estrogen sensitive. So soy intake is associated with lower endometrial cancer risk. That's right in the title there. Here's a systematic review and meta-analysis of observational studies. So the abstract here shares with us that dietary soy intake was inversely associated with endometrial cancer risk. Again, the more soy we consume, the less cancer we get. That's always a good thing. Current evidence indicates that soy food intake is associated with lower endometrial cancer risk. So, okay, I said it again. So more soy foods, less cancer, at least endometrial cancer and breast cancer. What about prostate cancer? Wait a second. Prostate cancer isn't estrogen sensitive. How can soy intake help prostate cancer? What? Well, it can. That's because if you didn't know, men also have hormones. Men also have estrogen. Men also have this intricate connection between estrogen levels and testosterone levels. And prostate cancer is a hormone-mediated cancer. So these phytoestrogen compounds can be very helpful and effective in reducing risk of prostate cancer. So don't listen to me, listen to the scientists that wrote the study. Soy consumption and the risk of prostate cancer, an updated systematic review and meta-analysis. The evidence from observational studies shows a statistically significant association between soy consumption and decreased prostate cancer risk. There we go. There we go. So, not just for the menopausal women, premenopausal women, postmenopausal women, the ovarian cancer, the endometrial cancer, breast cancer, not just for hot flashes, not just for endothelial function, not just for cardiovascular risk, prostate cancer in men, which is, of course, the most common type of cancer in men. So, good to reduce that risk. All right, but you might still be worried about your testosterone levels if you are a man still listening, which, quite frankly, I think that anyone that is still listening by now is probably not a man, but that's okay. That's okay. But this one's for you guys that are still listening. It helps me rest easy at night knowing that I can consume soy and not be at risk for low T or andropause or man boobs or being a soy boy or weak or anything like that. So here is a pretty clear study showing that neither soy nor isoflavone intake affects male reproductive hormones, an expanded and updated meta-analysis of clinical studies. This updated and expanded meta-analysis indicates that regardless of dose and study duration, neither soy protein nor isoflavone exposure affects total testosterone, free testosterone, estradiol or estrone levels in men. Period. The end of story. That's because, again, back to the introduction here, what we were talking about, these compounds, these phytoestrogen compounds, these compounds aren't plant estrogens. They're not phytoestrogens. They're estrogen receptor modulators. That's a really important distinction because that's different than like BPAs in our environment that are xenoestrogens that actually do promote estrogenic pathways in their body. That is what is driving a lot of these estrogen or hormonal, dysregulation issues, a lot of the hormone sensitive cancers, a lot of cancers in general, a lot of hormonal imbalances due to xenoestrogens, not from plant estrogens, but from xenobiotics like BPA and phthalates and a lot of other toxins in our environment. Not from soy, period, the end. However, this is a good segue into an important topic that I think deserves a whole episode in and of itself. And that is the topic of environmental contamination of soy products. Because as this graphic stated in the beginning, soy, 5 reasons not to eat soy. One of them is that soy is most likely from a GMO source. This is true. And given the fact that soy might be from a GMO source, means that is genetically modified to withstand the harsh effects from compounds such as glyphosate, which is the most widely used herbicide in our industrialized agriculture, as well as just at-home agriculture, weed killers and whatnot. So the fact is that when we're eating conventionally grown soy products, we are exposing ourselves to glyphosate in significant amounts. And that glyphosate might be what disrupts digestion, might be what disrupts hormones, might be what drives all sorts of cancers and chronic disease. That's what we need to be mindful of. So, of course, it goes without saying that a lot of people who are consuming soy products are not just eating soybeans and tempeh and tofu and soy milk. Most people are eating lots of highly processed versions of soy hot dogs and soy burgers. And that's really what's being marketed, which is probably conventional, probably GMO laden soy with glyphosate residues and all sorts of other toxins, probably with all sorts of other, additives and food preservatives and colorings and texturizers and all sorts of compounds that are toxic. So yes, we need to stay away from that stuff. But when we're talking about wrong graphic. When we're talking about the whole soybeans, when we're talking about flax seeds, when we're talking about Brussels sprouts and grapes, these compounds or these foods that contain all these phytonutrient compounds, that are quote unquote phytoestrogen or estrogen receptor modulators, we don't need to fear anything. We do want to be very mindful of our consumption of toxins, which we need to, emphasize that when we are consuming soy products specifically, we need to choose organically grown soy products. And another exclamation point that when we are eating plants in general, we should be focusing on the intact whole plant. We should be focusing on the soybean, that's tofu, which is slightly processed, the tempeh, which is slightly processed, the soy milk, which is slightly processed. But ideally, there's just like there's not other ingredients in there, right? It's just soy. Not a bunch of crap. We want to focus on the more whole soy products, whole plant food products, and avoid the highly processed stuff. That's just common sense. That's just like basic nutrition and nourishment 101. Eat whole foods. But hopefully it's pretty clear. I don't know why I keep up bringing up that graphic. Hopefully it's pretty clear that these compounds, these phytoestrogen compounds, are nothing to fear, regardless of your age or stage of life or sex or gender or anything like that. So yes, stay away from conventionally grown soy products. Yes, stay away from highly processed versions of these soy products, but feel free to eat the soy to your heart's content. One caveat. When we're talking about like balanced whole food plant-based eating, I don't want to launch into a whole nother episode, even though I very easily could. We talk about focusing on the carbohydrate-rich whole plant foods that are naturally lower in fat and more nutrient dense. This is a great way to optimize our metabolism and increase, clean energy creation and whatnot in our body. We need to point out the fact that soy is a legume that is higher in fat and higher in protein. And as such, we don't generally consider it to be a quote unquote green light food when we're talking about nutrition. We do want to be mindful of our consumption of soy due to the fact that it's higher in fat and protein. And fat and protein are not the predominant ideal fuel sources for our cells. The carbohydrates are. So the more fat and protein we eat, we just are depriving ourselves from that life-giving carbohydrate fuel. So that's one caveat as well. But organic whole soy, enjoy. And of course, flax seeds. There's so much good to say about flax seeds. And of course, Brussels sprouts and stilbenes and our resveratrol and our grapes and whatnot. All good stuff. So that is about a wrap. Hopefully you guys learned something. And if you do know anyone in your life that's still afraid of eating phytoestrogens because they think that it's going to make them grow boobs if they're a guy, or, grow cancer in their endometrium or in their breasts if they're a woman, you can feel free to share this information with them. And before I sign off, I just want to remind people that we are starting a spring cleanse on April 9th. Our first cleanse meeting is April 7th. And we have a special promo early bird deal for another week or so. So you can head to www.alter.health/cleanse and join us. This is a whole food cleanse. No crazy supplements or detox regimes or anything like that. Just nourishing yourself with tons of nutrient-dense whole foods and awesome hydrating beverages. That's the goal, to optimize liver function, liver health, detoxification. And I don't know why I'm still showing this graphic of the phytoestrogens. I just want to be me. Beat me. All right, that's it for now before I get myself in trouble here. Hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the week. Thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time.